Welcome everyone to the Emergent Essence Dynamics webinar number 3, Liberating the Resilient Self. It is February 12th and we have a few people joining us from Germany, I guess, and possibly elsewhere. The webinar is planned to run for about 60 minutes. Right up front, this webinar is actually challenging how we think of transformation, our whole approach to transformation, all right? We're going to go over that. What exactly is transformation? What are the different approaches towards it? And what is the approach that is going to liberate our resilience, okay? We're going to look at also some anchoring techniques when we do how to build resilience, how to anchor it, and then how to put it into motion and action. And we will look at the role of emotions when shifting a mindset or reprogramming a mindset. So emotions can either promote the process or interfere, depending on what's happening. And we're going to go over all of that. For a little bit of housekeeping, or to make an announcement, a couple announcements. Our full training of Emergent Essence Dynamics they are modules of 3-day intensives in person, and we have modules starting in March and in April. March 13th in Frankfurt, March 20th in Paris, and March 27th in Munich. And I'll give you guys more information about that at the end of the webinar. Just wanted to make that announcement up front, so for anyone listening to the recording, you know what's going on. And this webinar covers a lot of the foundation of what EED is training people, whether that's for coaching or for leadership, conflict work, teamwork, or personal growth, because everything deals with relationship here and how relationships function. So, moving ahead, what are we discovering today? I kind of mentioned it already, and then I'm going to get your comments and questions once I go through this. We're going to do an overview of what exactly is the resilient self, and we have to define resilience here and why that's important. And then we're going to look at what is really driving transformation, so that once we really understand what transformation is and what drives it, then we can work more efficiently and intelligently with people, so that we're creating a truthful foundation for transformation to happen. And we're also creating a truthful transformation instead of putting band-aids over things or creating false resonance, false fulfillment, or just chasing our tails. So we're also looking at, like I said, the role of emotions, but more so how to create emotional investment when shifting a mindset, creating a new mindset or a new belief, or going along with a new idea, or even just creating emotional investment in actions that someone is going to take, so that they are surely going to take those actions, as opposed to getting into a feel-good state of, wow, I could do that, and then dropping it an hour later or a day later or a week later. So this is emotional investment is really important for sustainability as well as accountability, and to hold new beliefs in place. And that works actually neurologically as well. We're going to cover that a little bit. And then, of course, when we are shifting a mindset or building resilience, we're always going to be met with resistance. That is a natural part of the transformation process. And not a lot of people are talking about what actually resistance is, or how do we deal with resistance. A lot of times we just want to shove it under the rug and wish it wasn't there, or eliminate it. Resistance can actually be very useful for building resilience. They have a direct relationship. And so for what we cover in the beginning of the webinar, towards the end, I'm going to go through a little bit of troubleshooting, give you some tips on how to handle resistance whenever it shows up. Would love to hear from you briefly on what are your comments or questions on what we're about to cover, what brought you here, what were some of your original curiosities. And how is this all sounding to you so far?
Okay, so for me, the resilient self is something I discover every time again, kind of, and I really want to work more with emotional investment from a resilient self perspective, because it's kind of related like to the idea of how to source action from resilience. I mean, without having to do something, still doing something. So I'm interested in the mechanics there.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna break that down, the mechanics, exactly what is a resilient self, how to access it, and how to get repeated access to it. Otherwise, we're all gonna take action, but if we're not connected to a foundation of resilience, those actions can create stress, anxiety, obligation, shame, fear, all of that, and it just makes us expend way too much energy, and it takes away from our creativity. And it takes away from being adaptable and flexible to all our circumstances. Resilience is the antidote to that. Yeah. Anything else, Amiel or Astrid? Feel free to jump in. If it feels okay, just give me a thumbs up and we can move on. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
hi, Astrid.
Hi. No, it's very current. I mean, I think resilience is one of the resistance is one of the key aspects to tackle before any change topic.
Yes.
I mean, everything starts with the resistance actually, and it's normal and it's very natural.
Actually, absolutely, yeah. Thanks. And yeah, go ahead. Did you have more to add, Astrid? And by the way, I wanted to know where you were calling from today.
I'm calling from Paris.
Awesome.
I'm a talent manager. I'm working with different nationalities, and I'm doing also coaching and getting certified in coaching.
Great.
Change and transformation are one of my interesting topics, and resilient self was really when I saw the name. The name of the seminar was interesting.
Great. Okay, so I'm sure you'll enjoy this, and I'll be back in Paris in the beginning of March, and that's actually where I'm based. I split my time between Paris and Canada. So
nice to hear.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just move right into it. So Astrid, I don't know if you've heard of emergent essence dynamics. This might be new to you. Amiel and Paul, you're familiar with this already. You've taken courses. So I wanted to briefly explain what is EED, what does it do, and how does it relate to what we're talking about today, okay? So first of all, there's a statement I'm gonna make here. And this has everything to do with how we work with people, how we work with ourselves, leadership, coaching, transformation, all of it. And that is this: everything happens in relationship. So nothing happens in isolation. We do not live in a vacuum. And relationships follow a unique fractal pattern. What that means is we're acting and reacting upon each other according to previous programming or patterns. We don't even know, we don't really need to know why they're there or how they got there, but we're all operating from conditioning, and that has to do with mindset, beliefs, our past, history, all our tastes, our preferences. These are all sort of sourced in unique patterns within ourselves, and those patterns get projected or expressed between each other, and the relationships themselves will establish a pattern. So the word fractal means those patterns, it's like a simple basic pattern is happening everywhere. And it can have its little variations on all levels, from the very small to the very big. But when you break it down, you'll see within a person, they're operating from a very limited number of patterns, all right? And those patterns are going to show up in pretty much all the relationships, and it's affecting all the issues that they're bringing to the table. So what's good to know is that when we focus on relationship and when we focus on the pattern, and we know then that it's the pattern that is driving both the person and the issue. So what does this have to do with transformation? So EED is a whole model that is designed to pinpoint those fundamental patterns driving human dynamics. So we're not focused on primarily on what's the issue, what is the person telling me, and then how can we solve this, how can we change it. What we're looking for is how is the person behaving and acting, and how does that reveal a pattern at work underneath. And we have very specific ways of bringing those patterns to the surface. So this applies to the way you coach, it applies to leadership, mediation, conflict resolution, facilitating groups, training, consulting, healing, and especially just personal applications, the way you interact with yourself and everyone else, okay? So how does EED do it? Well, before we try to transform anything, we want to create a baseline of resilience in the person. And in the next slide, I'll explain why we do that. So we want to focus on resilience first before we start transforming anything, all right? And then what we're looking at is how is this person acting and behaving, whether that's a person or a relationship or a group. And we want to get them acting and reacting so we can start to track the patterns of behavior and start revealing it, okay? Once we are revealing those core patterns, then we can shift the patterns in a resilient space. So we establish resilience first, we get the patterns running, and then we drop them into a resilient space, and that's where we can start shifting patterns. It is like you got to run the program, but then you create a space where it can drop into toggle mode so you can actually access the source code programming. Because if you try to shift something when it's not in a resilient space, all it's going to do is resist you, and the pattern is going to keep asserting itself and strengthening itself. So all you're going to do is be in opposition to the pattern, the fundamental pattern that's at work. Does this make any comments or questions? Yeah, go ahead, Astrid. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I have a question. I mean, I couldn't agree more about this whole pattern thing. I mean, my training is about in systemic coaching, so it's all about these patterns, not about the content that the client is talking about.
Yeah.
Now my question is more about like, when you say like focus on resilience first, resilience, not resistance. Right?
No, resilience. Yeah.
Focus on resilience first. So whatever client is talking about, what you suggest is to see where are the resilience points of that client.
That's right. You might see, and this is what we're going to get into next, is how do you identify and capture that resilience right from the beginning. You might see 99% resistance. You might see 99% low self-esteem or self-punishment or complaining, or, you know, but in the very act of what they're doing, they're using a resilient energy. And what we want to do is isolate that pure energy from the story, the narrative, the complaints, all of that, and just get them focused on that so that they start to drop into a more resilient space with themselves. They will calm down, and most of that resistance will fall away. Then the real core issue will start showing up. When we focus on resilience first, it actually stops us from going in circles, and it cuts down the level of distractions that we can meet. Does that make any sense to you, Astrid?
Yeah, I probably need a bit of more more concrete example to feel it, and answer this later.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I'll move on to the next slide. So this may already start to help explain what Astrid was bringing up, and it's a really great question, Astrid, and we're going to keep returning to it actually with each slide. So again, before we even approach transformation, we got to look at what's driving it. So there's a couple things that naturally drive transformation in the world we live in today, all right? We are in general seeking two main things for fulfillment and transformation. And most of that transformation is for the sake of fulfillment. We're all saying to ourselves, I want a better life. I want a better situation. Okay. I want to feel more fulfilled. I want to have more well-being. Right? I want to have more independence. I want to have more this, more that, more that, more that. Okay. So there's two main ways we're going about that. One is we are seeking power. I want more control. I want more security. I want more control over myself, my partner, the situation, my finances, so that I can have more security. And they're constantly asking the question, am I okay? I have this amount of money. Am I okay? I have this amount of love in my life. Am I okay? As far as control and security is concerned. Now that can be unending. This is where, okay, I got what I wanted, but it's still not enough. I got to get more. I got to get more. There's this constant drive asking, am I okay? The second one is validation, where we want recognition and a sense of belonging. Again, am I okay? Do I exist? Do people like me? What do people think of me? What image am I putting out there? Will people approve? Is this appropriate, not appropriate? What if I stand up? What will people think? It's all about recognition and belonging. That's a very tribal thing, okay? It's natural for us to seek power and validation, all right? But the point is, if power and validation are driving the transformation, it will be unending because the question is never truly answered. It's only asked again and again and again. Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I enough? That's another one. Am I enough? Okay. So what we call this is game play. It's like we're playing games with ourselves. We'll put these kinds of games in relationships. All relationships are based on seeking power and validation. And this is what creates the resistance. Why? Because it does not have a resilient foundation. Okay, so I'll explain what do we mean by resilient foundation. By the way, feel free to interrupt if you want to make a comment or question. I do tend to go quickly, so resilience, in a way, is just basic acceptance. Acceptance of the circumstance, acceptance of self, acceptance of the person in front of you, acceptance of the world around you. Non-resilience equals non-acceptance. And that's why that question, is this okay? Am I okay? Is it enough? Keeps coming up because there's something we're not accepting. Okay, and we immediately try to act on that by changing or modifying whatever is around us so that it feels okay. But if we're never resilient, we're actually never accepting. So it's an endless loop, okay? And I need to underline here or say, basic acceptance does not mean you have to like what's going on. You are simply recognizing what is going on, what is here, and being okay with it, meaning let it be here, okay? When we can move into even just a little bit of basic acceptance, we are getting in touch with our core vitality, our life force, our will, which means this gives us the ability to recover, to rise up, to return to our original shape, form, or self. And this is what ignites our creativity. This is where we become adaptable and flexible, and we're acting from our own free will as opposed to in reaction to everything. So where these games are constantly asking, am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Resilience makes a simple statement. I am okay. Right here, right now. And it'll add into that, I am okay and I am at peace. And that is the platform to create from. So in a way, whatever these games are seeking, resilience begins at the end of their game and makes that the starting point Does that make sense to you guys, what I'm saying? If I'm in a constant search for, am I okay, I could go forever. Resilience starts it the other way around. I am okay, now I can create from here. There's more freedom, and there is more flexibility, more creativity, and there's free will. And what it does is it creates a very simple state of mind where I'm not distracted from complexity, because life can throw me so many curveballs. And if I say, okay, I'm okay with that, I can handle it. I'm okay with that, I can handle that too. I may not know how to handle it yet, but I will find a way. So this is willpower and life force. So what EED is doing is it's taking whatever is here, and before we change anything, we're moving into a basic acceptance, then creating a resilient space. Then we can reconstruct the self so that it is thriving in the situation as opposed to struggling to survive, okay? The gameplay is all about survival mode. I need. Whereas resilience says, I have all the means and I will find the way. Therefore, I can now thrive. I'm free to create. So what we're really doing, we're actually really not transforming anything, but we're more like transmuting the self, shifting the whole mindset so that they could take the same actions, but it's all from a different context. It is from a context of thriving as opposed to taking action to simply survive. How does this hit you? Comments, questions here? I see you nodding, Paul. Anything to say or add? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simple switch of the mindset.
Yeah.
Which puts people into the idea of, let's say, own whatever they come up with, that they own their life.
Right.
And for me personally, it is like being, yeah, like seeing the fallacies of my actions before, mm-hmm. and understanding now from a easier point of view that, yeah, that I can make long-term steps, mm-hmm. at the same time benefiting from short-term input.
Right. And what this does is it creates more meaning and fulfillment in every single moment right now, as opposed to saying, being conditional and saying, well, when I accomplish this or when this is solved, then I'll be fulfilled. Then I'll be able to, you know, feel happy and creative. Was there anything you wanted to say or add, Astrid? Does this already start to answer a few things for you?
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm. And my question, because what you say is like, again, I can't agree more. But at the same, with my background, I'm from psychology. Mm-hmm. And for me, these are like the key questions that usually the therapy tackles with this foundational trust to the world. Because what you really describe is this, how it's in English, the foundational trust towards the world, that I'm okay, mm-hmm. that my trust, I mean, that my, whatever happens, it's okay, I can deal with, right. It. I can. So for me, the question will be, how do you deal with that in the coaching format? Because I understand it's a coaching company.
Yeah, yeah, and by the way, I'll stress that EED is a universal model, so it can fit underneath therapeutic models, psychology models. It'll fit underneath coaching models and leadership models and mediation models. It's really shifting your whole mindset in how you approach transformation, how you approach your methodology, and how you approach your clients, okay? Mm-hmm. That, again, the main thing is resilience first. And partly to answer your question, yeah, it is, how do I create a foundational trust in the world around me? Well, it's going to start from within, so that when I am okay with myself and I know I can depend on myself and I know I have innate power, I don't need to seek the validation. Already, I'm creating a resilient relationship with myself that affects my relationship with the world. So it's starting within first, then it gets externalized. Yeah, what happened there, Astrid?
Exactly, that's the point. But that's one of the things, like, people are getting to this point, like after years of therapy.
Yeah, yeah. And well, I guess Amy Ellen Pohl can attest to this. EED has developed a way where it doesn't have to take years. It can be done in an instant, but it requires repetition because, and in the next slides, you'll see, we'll toggle back and forth, resilience, non-resilience. And it's really just cultivating a habit to refocus our awareness and our experience, right?
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so here is another way to describe. There are different, let's say, levels or spaces of transformation or different levels of our relationship to truth, okay? And that's this pyramid on the left. On the right, this illustrates how we're in relationship to ourselves and each other and what's our relationship to the world around us. So everyone comes from a story, a point of view, and they say this is the truth, but it's a singular truth because it's a singular point of view. It's only one thin slice of the pie. If we keep engaging with a person's story, all we're doing is reinforcing that belief system, and it keeps them closed to any new information coming in, okay? And if that story is not coming from a foundation of resilience, it's just going to keep reinstilling their fear, their stress, their anxiety, their need for power, need for validation, and it's going to determine their behaviors. Then when they get in relationship to other people, they're actually not open to being influenced. It's more they're in opposition or agreement with others, right? And this is what can create conflict in relationships, is when you've got two people coming from two closed realities, they're either going to find consensus or opposition. So we can call this truth and opposition. For the person on the left, what they believe is true for them. The person on the right, what they believe is true for them, but they might be conflicting truths, and so they can't find resolution or agreement here. They're only looking for consensus, win, lose, or compromise. If we try to facilitate transformation on these levels, all we're going to meet is resistance because we're knocking up against a closed reality system, a closed bubble, okay? If you speak their language, if you speak to their beliefs, make them feel good within that bubble, it might seem like there's a transformation, but it can also promote self-deception. Now, so this is where everything is based on rules and games, etc. If we drop, that's the space where we're going to meet the most resistance. So EED is creating a resilient space, meaning we've got to drop below this red line. And what we're teaching you right from the first module is how do you open this bubble, okay? How do you get yourself and the other person to truly get inside the other person's bubble, as like through acceptance and fascination, and also be willing to be influenced, meaning they've got to open their bubble a little bit. Now, relationships work like mirrors. As soon as one person opens their bubble a little bit, the other person responds. If we can create a circulation of energy here where we've got two open bubbles coming together, the identity, ego, or personality starts to relax. They start to share information, and they can start realizing, oh, our opposite views can actually be complementary. And then they can drop even further where the ego totally relaxes or even disappears momentarily, and they feel a sense of unity and oneness. And this is where paradox can even be reconciled. Your reality does not destroy mine. In fact, both our realities can enhance each other. And in the end, there is a unified truth because all our realities are an expression of the same source. And this is where we move more into a sense of timeless self, permanent self, invincible self, divine self, whatever you want to call it. But we're no longer driven by our mental constructs and belief systems. This is where we're in a state of all potential, okay? So what we're doing here is, this is what we mean. We can start tracking the patterns on the game level, but then we start interrupting those patterns so we can drop into a more fluid state and eventually drop into this essential state. This is the real toggle mode here. This is where then the person from a resilient space can start rearranging themselves, choosing how to reconstruct themselves. Then we can capture that. The patterns shift, things are released, they let go of hang-ups. Then they can go back into the game, but with a connection to that source. And they actually can start toggling back and forth between game and dream, game and dream. They can have some rigidity, but they can choose to loosen up. Then they can regain their rigidity. They can choose to loosen up, okay? If we can toggle back and forth between game and dream, we will have healthier relationships because we will spend less time resisting and opposing, and we'll spend more time cooperating and learning. Any comments or questions there? This is another way to show what resilient space is. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
For me personally, the biggest motivation in using emergent essence dynamics is that I can always get the best of both worlds whenever I'm in opposition to something.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you never think at first that it's possible. But then it's possible. It's like making a really good trade with someone.
Right.
Like you're not just trying to on the game level, trying to rip the other person off somehow, but you're finding a constructive way to get behind that and to really create value for all participants.
Right.
And it's amazing. Yeah.
And I want to make one last note. Like I said, relationships act like mirrors. They will reflect each other. It only takes one person to drop into the resilient space. The other drops automatically. So what we're training here, and this is how it applies to coaching, for example, we're training the coach how to be in this dream space from the beginning. That takes some self-discipline and self-awareness. And we've got, you know, the EED model to hold that into place. The way you act and behave with the client will determine the beginning of that resilient space. And then they can drop and you can sustain the drop, all right? So that your whole coaching interaction is happening in this dream level. The client is going to start on the story and game level. And you're not forcing them down here. You're not even inviting them down here. They are compelled to go. And sometimes they'll go unconsciously, just from your presence. You can capture that and sustain it. Naturally, they're going to go back up. This is where we say, you know, you'll meet resistance, but then you can quickly neutralize it, drop them back. You can even choose to go up to the game level with them to get some patterns going. You'll drop yourself, they'll drop with you. So this is what creates the genuine trust and authenticity in the relationship, is when you are coming from this open bubble space first. And you are coming from basic acceptance of the client. Again, that's why we say we don't rush into transformation. Because if I, as the coach, rush into transforming the client, even if they tell me to transform them, then I'm coming from a level of non-acceptance. I'm actually playing into a game. If I come from acceptance first, the client will start cultivating some acceptance. They'll relax and they'll become more fluid with themselves. Now we can have some transformation happening, okay? So this is just one more way to illustrate, okay? And EED is all about training us to open and maintain this space of being in dream, because we're all really good at being in the story and game level, okay? And not a lot of us know how to recognize games. That's the other thing EED will train you, is what are these dynamics happening in the game, so you can interrupt those dynamics, okay? So, yeah, go ahead.
So I once had a work to do at a project where in the aftermath, I think I would have liked to be resilient when I started there, because I started there as an agile coach and I really wanted to add benefit and value to the project, which should be created in an agile way of working.
Right.
And in the end, I did a mistake because I really wanted to install like an agile way of working, and people said they wanted it. So I was in there in a game. I was entangled in a game of really doing it. And I really wanted to succeed in that. Now, if I would have started there with resilience, then I would have said whatever solution fits in the end is the best one.
Right.
And so this was for me, this is for me a nice example of how to be having different point of view from the beginning.
Great. And to go back to the last slide here, by you entering the arena, right? Okay. You were actually, I want success in this session. I mean, you're coming from seeking some power or validation, right? If I get the success, I get the security and I get the recognition, for example, right? And so, and it can be a very, very, very noble concern. Like, I really want to help this group. I really want to transform this team.
And they're really asking for it on the top of it.
Exactly, because they also want more security and control over what they're doing, and right? They want the success too. I'm not saying these are bad things, okay? But if it's coming from this empty place of like, okay, so we got to get this done. If we don't get it done properly, it's not okay. Do you understand? It's putting pressure, unneeded pressure. So therefore, we're not going to be operating from a resilient place. Then we're playing a game with each other. You're playing a game with yourself. You're playing a game with the team. You're playing a game with the work. Because all you're going to do is whatever change you want to implement, they're either going to resist it or they're going to agree with it. And it's not necessarily going to be for the best of their true potential. Because if something doesn't fit within their bubble of reality, they're going to reject it, and then you're going to have to convince or conquer. Right? Whereas if they're in this space, they have more humility with themselves, amongst themselves, and they can be more transparent and truthful with themselves and not feel shame. Do you understand? That's what I want to describe next. Like, what is happening in the resilient space? When we are in this resilient space, there is natural safety. Because if I'm resilient and I'm okay, then I really can't be harmed. And I have access to creativity. It allows for pure transparency, and we can have a genuine presence, okay, without artificial constructs. This is all natural, okay? Why? Because there is a foundation of basic acceptance, and nothing is taboo. Ideally, nothing is taboo. The more we cultivate and strengthen and build the resilient space, that statement becomes more and more true, where nothing is taboo, okay? When we're in this resilient space, then that fosters fascination with whatever's happening, and we can stay with it, and we're not constantly judging it as good or bad. It just simply becomes fascinating. So there can be a flare of anger. Oh, is that appropriate, inappropriate? Does that offend me? Does that not offend me? That will happen in the game space, but in the resilient space, the anger is just energy. And there is a message in the anger to investigate. There is an energy in the anger to investigate. And because there's a basic acceptance, because there's natural transparency, presence, safety, the anger can just flare up and cycle out. And then we can discover what's purely in there. It could be passion. It could be creativity. It could be we need to pay attention to something. Instead of wasting all this time with, we have to protect ourselves from the evil anger. Is this making sense, what I'm saying? Okay.
A lot, yes.
Okay. So again, I'm going to say there's no artificial constructs, meaning there is a natural free flow of give and receive, because a resilient space is also a generous space. This means I don't have to start designing rules of nonviolent communication, 2 minutes to speak without interruption, active listening. All those things are constructs to imitate a resilient space, yet those constructs can be weaponized to still aggravate the fragility of a person. If we go to the source of resilience, there will be a natural deep listening. There will be a natural mutual respect and a natural give and receive, because it's generous. Does this make sense, what I'm saying? You can still use those techniques, but they feel very different in a resilient space. Go ahead, Astrid.
No, I totally agree. Usually the key question, I fully agree, and because I know it first of all from my experience, but mostly I have reached this point through therapy, not through coaching, because I had both experiences.
Yeah.
For me, what you describe, it's really a true deep experience that I have reached through my therapy.
Right.
Then the coaching was much easier to work with on some questions, but what you describe is very deep for me.
Yeah, and we get to that depth because, again, EED is operating on the dream and source level primarily. And there's other webinars where I show you exactly how do we drop them in, what are key combinations of questions. And the next webinar will be all about that. How do you create key combinations of questions that get us in that space very efficiently? And let's say the difference between, EED is cathartic. There is a healing aspect to it. But we're not going to be there to analyze or categorize necessarily. So therapy can spend energy doing analysis, let's say. So can coaching. We don't need to analyze because everything is shown to us through the behavioral patterns, okay? And we very strategically provoke those behavioral patterns so that they show themselves automatically and truthfully, even just spontaneously. So we're working with behavior and energy. We're not working with words. It's all about action and response. What are you showing me? What are you showing me now? And our questions are designed for you to show, not tell. Do you understand? Because there can be a mismatch between what I'm saying and what I'm doing. And we're so focused on what are you doing? You tell me you're happy, but your body certainly doesn't. Do you understand? So the other thing is we're balancing awareness and experience so that there is congruency in the person, and that's what allows them to go into the deeper places. If there's a mismatch between what they're feeling, thinking, saying, doing, behaving, they're never going to get a depth of experience because there's going to be always this inner conflict and inner resistance. We take one idea, one feeling, one thought, and we line it all up with the mind, emotion, body. That opens up the doorway into, let's say, higher wisdom, divine self, where they can really drop into that source level. Because when there's congruency, the ego doesn't have to fight or conflict. When there's congruency and resilience, the ego can start taking a back seat, okay? So the resilience space is the means, the environment, to have a direct experience of the timeless self, to get in touch with the divine spark beyond the identity. This is what we're kind of calling source. This is where we are restoring the well-being. This is where the person restores their autonomy. They're not seeking outside approval, outside power. It's all from within. Any comments or questions there? This is a brief description of the resilient space, but it's felt, it's not verbally designed. It is felt and created moment by moment, okay?
The space is for me, just to anchor for me again, when we're here. It's reached for me when all need to do anything drops from me, and I see that I'm still the same person, totally okay, and I still can strive for things, I still can do things, but it feels completely okay to do it whenever, however, stress-free, and connected.
And if I'm the facilitator, it's coming from me first. I'm walking in the room already with this resilient space within myself. So that way I'm not putting pressure on myself to get the job done, to convince them, to manipulate them, to, get upset if they resist or disagree. All good, all fine, I can work with it, and I'm constantly engaging from that place. That actually brings stronger leadership from me. It creates a better foundation of authority. Any challengers or resistors become a champion. It's a way of converting those resistors into champions. And it's starting to create unity and alignment within the group because I'm respecting the diversity of the group. And all their stories. I'm respecting all the stories because I know all those stories converge in this unified place of source, okay? Mm-hmm. And if I keep working with what's emerging, eventually all solutions will present themselves. My job is really just keep revealing it, because I also know all those solutions were there from the very beginning, but we needed to explore the resistance, the questions, all this in order to arrive there. Okay, so that makes me more okay with everything that's going on. So another way to look at it, what is the resilient self, all right? Basically, there is a resilient self and a non-resilient self. Now, I'm calling the non-resilient self the pathetic self, only because it's based on pathology, pathos, drama, and it can be pathological, meaning obsessive, and also what goes with pathos is it can be self-indulgent. So poor me, poor me, poor me, poor me. Here's the main difference between resilient self and pathetic self. They both take action. They can both take the same action, but they come from a different context. The pathetic self is disconnected from source, therefore it's seeking a source, seeking a foundation through power or validation. The resilient self is plugged into the source, and it has a free flow from source energy. So therefore, it creates because it can. Pathetic self creates because it must. It's driven by death, so to speak. If I don't do this, I may die because I'm so disconnected. If I lose control, I may die. If I lose my sense of self, I may die, I may disappear, because it's feeling that gap where it does not have a foundation of timeless source. So it has to become its own God, so to speak, in its own world, in its own little bubble. Resilient self is free to interact with anything and everything, okay? So in every moment, both will show up. What EED is doing is recognizing pathetic self, but we're not really engaging with it. We're refocusing it towards resilient self and plugging it into source so it can still take action. So it's calming this down. The other thing about a resilient self is because it's connected to source and because it's okay with everything, it doesn't really have to take the action because it's okay with everything. That's complacency. There's a danger the resilient self can become complacent. The pathetic self gives it a kick in the butt to move, so to speak. So the pathetic self can give the resilient self motivation to work on something. The resilient self can calm down the pathetic self so that we're not constantly creating from disaster, okay? And what we want is to bring them into healthy relationship so that both are working together. They're both an expression of source. But for your higher awareness, the awareness of I am who I am, we want you to be reorienting yourself here. You can use the pathetic self to identify the next thing to address, the next thing to do, but we don't want you transforming and solving from the pathetic self. We want you to switch over to transform and solve and create from resilient self. So the main difference, again, it's what I said earlier, same actions, different context. So the resilient self comes from thriving. It takes actions that create from source. Whereas pathetic self is taking actions that seek validation or control. Same action. I need to talk to my boss to ask for a promotion. Resilient self does it because I can. It can enrich my life. Pathetic self says, because I must, otherwise I'm going to quit my job because I'm so unhappy. Did you get the difference? Comments, questions? What makes you laugh there, Astrid?
I just had exactly the example you brought 2 days ago with one of my talents.
So again, your client says, oh, I'm not happy in my job. I'd really like a promotion. I really want to talk to my boss. I'm a bit nervous. I'm scared. Before we do anything about it, let's just reorient the mindset, then revisit the action. Do you understand? That would be, say, a summary of the EED coaching session. Okay, instead of what are your values, let's shift perspective, all of that. No matter what the values are, no matter what the perspective is, no matter, if they're still driven by that little gap, any value, perspective, life purpose, all of that is still seeking validation and control. So it's really not transforming anything. If we move them over to resilient self, okay, and other webinars, or maybe a little bit later, we can look at, okay, how would I address it? But how are you okay in your job right now? What if you don't get that promotion? How are you okay? What if your boss rejects you? How are you still okay? How are you still okay is one doorway into activating resilience. And they just say, huh, that moment of stun, surprise, or momentary calm, when we capture that and open it up and anchor them in that, say, what's it like to be in that calm? How does that feed you? How does that nurture your well-being? What's your sense of self now when you're in this resilient place? Then say, okay, from that resilience now, what's it like to look at your boss? Oh, not so threatening, because I know he can't destroy me. He could say no. I also know I could find another job, and I can still ask. I could actually have an intelligent conversation with my boss, right? Because they're coming from that grounded, calmer, creative place that's full of vitality, as opposed to this destabilized, nervous, stressful anxiety. If I don't get the promotion, I'm going to die place. That's the difference. Am I illustrating this well? Does it make sense?
Very well.
Okay.
Although I had discussions with the cases when they say, like, I can't be okay if I stay.
Right.
But it's another story.
It's another story, and it might even be, well, then, again, so new question, what's it like to kill the job, kill the dream, right? Completely let it go, and put them in the resilient state to address it. Again, no matter what we're addressing, the first thing we want to do is put them in a resilient state and then address it, because we will get completely different answers. And we won't chase our tail so much.
Sure. Agree. Totally.
Okay, so let's say we establish resilience. Let's say that now we've got a new mindset going on, all right? So there's a reprogramming that can happen to hold the resilience in place and anchor it. I'll move through this a little quickly. This will demand, let's say, other webinars, or it demands, like, this is all the stuff we learn in the EED courses, is how do you work with the emotions? But I wanted to just give a brief review here. When we're ready to take action, we need some emotional involvement in order for the action to happen. Why? Because emotions have 4 basic functions. They bind things together. That means they can bind beliefs together, all right? When we're programming a belief or a narrative, if we do it emotionally, it's going to bind stronger and faster. Emotions provide the drive to act. They give us the impetus. They're all about motion. Emotions are used for programming. Your best memories are the ones that had the most emotional investment in them. Where you were detached and cool with no investment, you're going to forget that easily. Again, and emotions help store information. We can store emotions in our body, and those emotions are storing information and memories, so that when we release the emotion, we're also releasing the memories and the information, okay? So there is a time and place to use emotions, and it depends on what we're doing. And it basically boils down to, are we programming something or deprogramming something? And then the last webinar, we looked more at the deprogramming aspect, okay? So let's say we're in a resilient state, we've got some solutions, and now we want to really program the self so they're accessing this resilient state of mind. So we want to anchor the vital emotions, the resilient emotions, in order to program something. And we want to attach the beliefs, the vision, and the new story or narrative to those vital emotions, meaning emotions that feed the well-being. What we do not want to do is we don't want to mix toxic or self-sabotaging emotions in with that narrative, okay? So, for example, if we're dealing with pathetic self, to release a mindset, whatever emotions are going along with it, we want to detach the client from the story and narrative that got attached with those toxic emotions. We don't want them telling the story in the narrative while they vent the emotions. We just want to vent the pure toxicity, get it out of the system, go into a neutral place, and then reactivate the resilience. That was dealt with in more detail in the last webinar. By the way, Astrid, if you want a recording of the last webinar, feel free to email me and I can send you a recording of it. Yeah.
The answer is yes, I'll email you.
Okay, great. When we're dealing with resilient emotions, vital emotions, emotions that nurture the well-being, we want to keep feeding the energy back to well-being. I feel strong. Great. How does that feed back to your well-being? You want to reinforce that emotion with what's happening in their body. How are they speaking to themselves? It's not like, I wish I was confident. Oh, I feel confident. Oh, but I wish I was confident. No, I feel confident. I'm standing straighter, taller. I'm breathing deeper. I am confident. So again, it's creating a congruency in the emotions, the body, and the language, okay? And that will further create the programming. If they just say, I am a confident person, and there's no emotional investment, there is going to be no belief, all right? But you got to have the direct and real experience of that energy and emotion. Now, how do you amplify that emotion? You don't say, make it bigger, make it stronger, because then it becomes artificial or manufactured. You put their awareness on the sensations, the energy that's happening. You can localize that sensation or feeling in a particular place of the body, drop their whole awareness in there, pull in some fascination and enjoyment, and immediately it starts amplifying itself. Add in feeding back to well-being, and it further amplifies. Okay, and this is how we can create high states of resonance. Okay. So why would we want that kind of emotional investment? Well, if we have a new idea or a new belief, first we want that new idea or belief to spring from the resilient space, from the resilient self, not from the pathetic self, okay? And we can bind that idea with that foundation of resilience and add desire to it. That's the emotional investment. I'm a really confident person. Wow, where can you use that? I can use it at work. I can talk with my boss from real confidence. I feel equal to my boss. Wow, we're sharing creative ideas. Oh my God, wow, that feels great. How much do you want that? 10 out of 10. So you're fusing the creative idea with the resilience and the desire. And that starts to bind. Add in vision and emotional well-being. Wow, I can have this great conversation with my boss. We feel equal. There's mutual respect. How does that feed you? I feel like I am valued, and I'm valuing myself first. I'm not dependent on my boss's approval. I feel like a partner. Well, okay, great. You know, keep with that vision. And then we want to anchor the triggers in the body and the language. How are you standing? How are you sitting? How are you moving? Right? And you want to add the emotional flow in with the whole physical stature. Then you can test that degree of investment with a little bit of trouble. Okay, so there you are. You're having that great conversation with your boss. You're breathing deep. You feel confident. You feel like a partner. And what if he says, not interested? Throw a little bit of trouble there. They might say, oh God, ugh. Rebuild it, re-trigger the resilient space, rebuild the investment, and say, okay, try again. And within 2, 3, 4 times, they'll say, actually, that doesn't matter to me, because the partnership with my boss feels even more important. And actually, by partnering with him, I can work around his doubts, his fears. And I'm not actually attached to, I need the promotion. Actually, I'm creating more well-being in my relationship with my boss. So it doesn't even matter if I stay in my job or not. I'm having a really good relationship with my boss. Well, what's the implication of that? Probably could be more of in partnership with him. I can serve the company better, serve myself better. If I get a promotion, bonus. And even if I choose to leave the job, I'm leaving with more credibility. which is just going to get me the next job, and I can start the new job from that partnership level from the beginning. So I will be a valued employee because I'm valuing myself. Do you guys understand the implications here? I know I'm talking something through out of the imagination, but just the logical sequence of what can happen, so that it's creating more meaning in everything. So when we get these higher emotional states that feed well-being and reinforce resilience, get the client to name that resilient state. Doesn't matter what they call it. First thing that pops into mind. You want them to identify the particular strength or quality they're experiencing. That could be confidence. It could be, I feel invincible. It doesn't matter. And you want them to localize that into a body center. Why? Because it's tangible. It's trackable. I should say, also have them name the sensation that they're experiencing. Because again, it's tangible and trackable. Why would we want to do this? So that they can reactivate it if they lose it, okay? So that they're not conceptually trying to recreate something. They can actually physically, tangibly re-trigger something. While they're in that resilient emotional state, they can establish a key word or a phrase or an image or a gesture. It could be, you know, a simple thing like yes. And with repetition, it starts to magnetize the whole state with that gesture. You can even magnetize it to an external object. We show you how to do this in our modules. We spend a whole afternoon getting heightened emotional states and magnetizing it to postures and gestures and objects. But the most important thing about basic anchoring is name the state with the strength and the quality, identify a body center, and get a key sensation. And then you can have these other structures to accompany it. And they're just more like putting a label on the button. They can push that button and they're back in the resilience. And then they can practice that on their own, re-triggering and re-triggering. Another way for them to quickly move from pathetic to resilient. Any questions or comments there?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the toxic emotions. How long or how do you know they have been released, or what if only toxic or bad stuff is coming up and you can't find something resilient?
Okay, that's where we get into the troubleshooting. Perfect. So if you're doing some programming and they collapse, they deflate, they shut down, fear and doubt kicks in. It's like, I don't know if I can do this. Well, don't program. I mean, you can like stop, let them have that fear or doubt, let them vent it. Okay, that's just, you know, okay, great, stop. Great, so you have that fear. Boom. Dissociate from the new narrative, just focus on the pure energy of the fear or the doubt, or have them call upon in themselves. Is that true? True or not true? Okay. There's reasons why that fear and doubt will come in. That'll be shown here on the list. So if something, again, just what I mean by toxic, it's a really strong word. It can just mean simple non-resilience. It's not going to be helpful for the resilient state. So we don't want to keep feeding it with the new story. We want to separate that out, let them release it. Just release the pure energy. Okay? So we want to release energy without the story and without any judgment of themselves, because they could be saying, oh, I shouldn't be doubting this. I should be more resilient. No. Just let yourself doubt. Let yourself have the doubt for a second. Let's cycle it through. If we have pure focus on pure energy, it cycles out a lot faster. Okay? So even the venting is done from a baseline of acceptance. It's just we don't want to cross the wires with old story or new story, just pure release of energy. The other thing is, and then they can vent and be back in a neutral space. Okay, vent, shake it off, now it's here. A little bit of relief. Great, that's an entry into resilience, back to neutral. Now we can re-trigger resilience. Or if fear and doubt show up and collapse, don't even engage with the collapse. Just refocus back to the resilient moment. Let them have a moment of fear or doubt, but we don't need to even engage or indulge in it. Just refocus. I did this with a client. I just had a key word. All I had to say was Tuesday night, and the client was back. Tuesday night, because the client defined for me sort of a highlight moment in their life about something about Tuesday night. And I just anchored them in that pure, resilient, resonant state. And then any time in the conversation, they started to doubt themselves or lose energy, I just said, Tuesday night, and they were back. And I could capture and sustain. If that resistance insists, you could, again, stop what you're doing, release it, or take the pure energy of that resistance and convert it to resilience. So here you are, really doubting yourself, really angry with yourself. You really want to push forward, and you feel like you're digging your heels in your ground and you're fighting yourself so hard. What strength are you using to fight yourself? What is the sensation of that fighting energy? And again, you want to separate it from judgment. Well, I shouldn't be fighting myself, but you are. Oh, I don't want to be punishing myself, but you are. So just what's the pure energy that it takes to, whiplash yourself in the back? What does it take for you to push yourself uphill, right? Or hold yourself back? What's the pure energy of that? Cycle that back to it's a strength. It does feed your well-being. Again, you're taking the story and judgment out and just into the pure energy. And suddenly resistance becomes resilience. You can do this with groups too. Hey man, you keep fighting me on every point I get. I mean, that's takes strength to keep insisting and fighting. What does it feel like to fight? What are you enjoying in that fighting energy? Already, you're going to turn your participant around. The other reason why they might collapse is the actions might be too big for the moment. So break the actions down into simpler steps that have low consequence and higher manageability. Don't start going for big leaps and big actions like, oh, wow, you're so resilient. You can go quit that job today. Oh, wow, you're so resilient. You can go start that company. You can go divorce your spouse. I mean, might be too big, and you're probably going to be met with resistance when it's too big. So break it down. Again, what EED is doing, we're actually looking at the pattern and we make a shift in the pattern. What's the smallest action of low consequence we can do today to support the new pattern? And when we do an accumulation of those micro actions, eventually and quite quickly, they'll get to the big leap on their own. Okay? So this is more about accumulate the micro actions. And for any action that's done, keep reinforcing the meaning and the purpose of the action. Keep cycling it back to well-being. There you can play with the emotional investment, the vision. So great. You're going to have a conversation with your boss, from resilience, what's the outcome you want? How does that feed back to you, your well-being? What's the strength you're using? And when you make it more about meaning and purpose, as opposed to got to get the outcome, they actually will enjoy the action. There's desire in it. There's more likelihood they will actually do it because it becomes compelling, because it's resilient, it's got meaning, it's got purpose, and it feeds their well-being. And when you've got a new mindset, new ideas or beliefs, be very protective at first of critical voices. And guess where those critical voices will come from? Your client. Oh, but what if I fail in the conversation? Wait, we're not there yet. Just focus on the idea of partnership, valuing yourself. Keep stroking that, keep feeding that. What's a daily habit you could do to feed that? Then return to the question, what if I fail? Because you probably won't fail the more you feed the resilience. So sometimes clients try to be a realist way too soon. They're going to want to make too big of a leap, and they're going to be too much of a realist. When you're beginning a resilient mindset, it's a little tiny seed that's starting to sprout. You've got to nurture it so it takes root, gains strength, and becomes more sturdy in the system. Then you can start exposing it to more and more realism, okay? The more a client experiences their own resilience, the more real it feels to them, okay? So keep nurturing new ideas with a daily practice that reinforces resilient well-being. It's not about accomplishing things. So even just 10 minutes a day, get in touch with that resilient state. There's nothing to accomplish here except enjoy the flow of resilience in you. That goes a long way. Does that help? Does that help answer some of your questions there, Amiel, and are there any comments here?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what if it takes really long to get the client to feel like, yeah, something is really happening? Like, what if the seed is just really small and it takes a long time to build down the doubt and fear and resilience?
Well, again, number one, EED, it won't take long. And number two, when you're coming from a resilient space, you're not putting time limits or time lengths on things that you know, because of the fractal nature of everything, just a little spark, a little seed, and we can put focus around it. And even if it takes, let's say that's the whole hour session, we spent, all this time fighting back all this resistance just to get them to drop into a resilient state. They're there for a couple seconds. We capture that. That in itself is already going to be a lot of progress because that's the focus. And I guarantee you is when they go there once and you return them and you return them and you refocus and return, every time they return, they'll stay there longer because it feels more natural. For some people, maybe they've never consciously experienced a resilient space. It's going to feel weird and new. They might briefly enjoy it and then it might scare the shit out of them. That's okay. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to say, I've got to get this much of a result. Because again, it's like going back to Paul's example, you're actually coming from a game yourself. I need to achieve this in order to feel competent and know that I'm bringing value to the client, and that brings security recognition, all that kind of stuff. That's gameplay. So catch yourself on that.
Yeah, I know I get into the game a lot, like when they try to release their energy, but I feel like there's no shift happening and they just tell the story over and over again. And I am sad, I am sad.
And there again,
yeah.
With a basic acceptance, you'll let them tell that story over and over. And your focus is catching any little bit of resilient spark. I once had a session with a CEO, and for 25 minutes, I just kept hearing the story and this and that, and I would interrupt, catch a little spark, he'd throw it away, and he'd throw it away, and he'd throw it away. But he needed to cycle that energy out. And I was just then, fine, vent your story. And I just make him more and more aware. You're venting. I was very, very aware not to have him re-traumatize himself, but more ventilate. So he's in a release process, okay?
That's exactly my point. How do you know when they are re-traumatizing themselves, and how do you keep them out of that?
Because you don't want them, I'm so sad. So I'm not going to ask, what are you sad about? I'm going to say, just connect with the sensation of the sadness.
So how does that feel like?
Yeah. And it's done in a context of let's release it, not indulge in it. That's the difference. And I can even directly tell them that, like what's it like to release the sadness, to let it flow. Or if I do ask, what are you sad about? Well, this, that, and that happened. Then I'll say, all right, fine. We're going to separate. What's more important, the sadness or the story? Well, both. Well, what's bothering you more? It's what happened. Okay, now we're going to separate the emotion from the story. And I could say, just, take a few minutes, just write out the main points. Right? Or I'll drop them into a resilient space briefly, and I'll say, put the story up on the screen and vent the details. Tell the details, but without all that emotional investment. Because when they're telling the negative story or the toxic story with the accompanying emotions, they can be re-traumatizing or reinforcing that self-defeating programming. So it's, again, and that's, again, from last webinar, right? Be more fascinated with the available resilience than the possible disasters. That creates more, again, that's reinforcing resilient space. There is more natural safety, and they won't re-traumatize or destroy themselves in a resilient space because their main foundation is the resilience. It's so surprising how much can get released very, very safely. So basic summary is, in any moment, like, and it's again, like what we just addressed with you, Amiel, like, okay, so what if they only have a tiny, tiny shift, right? That can be gameplay. So I need to get a result. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Where am I coming from? That's a good tell of, am I coming from a resilient space, or am I coming from that game space of, I need security, control, validation, or recognition, right? If you want to spark resilience, a key question you can ask yourself or the other person, okay, despite what's going on, despite the current circumstances, you know, nothing changes here, how are you still okay? And whatever sparks in a moment of realization, awareness, surprise, peace, or calm, that's what you capture. And EED shows you how to capture it and build it, all right? That's what the modules are for. We have very specific ways of doing that. When you want to drop them into a resilient space, like I said, capture those moments of surprise, peace, calm. You can have them connect to it, anchor it a little bit, and then you can ask what feels timeless here or permanent here, or what feeds your well-being here. And that will start to sustain that resilience. If you want to sustain the resilience or program more resilience into the experience, keep feeding whatever strengths and resonance they're experiencing, feed it back to well-being. Because a lot of times people will get some resonance and feel strong, and then they want to go out and act and do and share. Before they do any of that, feed it back to themselves so you create more of a perpetual motion of give-receive. Because then it's like a constant recharge of the battery. All strengths and resonance feed back to well-being, which just feed the strengths and the resonance. When you want to reinforce resilience, come from basic acceptance, open up the fascination, and create enjoyment of the pure vital energy. So even if anger or sadness pops up, there's a basic acceptance of the anger or sadness. There's a fascination with the energetic flow of the anger or sadness. It's not about the judgment or story that go around the anger or sadness. And then what's the pure vital energy that is inside that sadness or anger? And what does that give back to the well-being? What are they enjoying in that? All right. So what might have been thought as a negative experience becomes an accepted and vital experience. And when we're testing the resilience, you know, the integrity of it, what we want to do is keep reconstructing it and reconstructing it. Let the client reconstruct themselves. So you throw them a little bit of trouble, see how they react. They might destabilize a bit, have them reset and re-trigger, and then throw them a little trouble and reset and re-trigger. And eventually the trouble just slides right off them. And we do this all the time, right from the very beginning in the EED trainings. We build up the resilience, then we try a little test. And always the reaction is more like, huh. So whereas previously when they were non-resilient, they'd get all charged up and worked up. And then you get them resilient very quickly, within 5 minutes, throw the very same thing at them, and there's just, it's not apathy, it's not non-reaction, it's just, hey man, that's not a part of the equation anymore. Doesn't faze me, doesn't affect me. And when you're building emotional investment in anything, Combine resilience with desire with well-being. Those three together will increase the willpower of the person, and it will be a pleasure to act as opposed to an obligation to act, okay? And without the pressure on themselves, without the stress and the anxiety. Let's see if I have one more here. Nope, okay. Any questions or comments there as we start to close? All of this you learn in the modules. I know I'm throwing a lot of information. Some of this you can take and run with it, all right? For questions on, well, how exactly do I do this? How do I spark resilience or test it or drop into it or reinforce it? These are all trained experientially, practically. You get the theory along with it, but it's practice, 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 do, because EED is based on action and reaction and behavior. So everything you're learning, you're doing it. Okay, it's not like you sit there for the whole day getting lectured at. No, you're getting taught all of this in the modules, and all of this I'm showing you today is all foundational, and so that's what we train in the first module, a 3-day intensive. It's called Revealing Essence. That's how you refocus on resilience, how you spark it up, build it, anchor it, test it, and put the client into action from a resilient state, and how you cultivate a resilient space in the relationship and the whole work environment. So we're coming to Frankfurt, March 13th to 15th. We're coming to Paris, March 20th to 22nd. We're in Munich twice with Module 1, March 27th to the 29th, and April 24th to 26th. And then we're in Berlin, June 12th to 14th. Then we've got Module 2, Module 3, we've got our conflict course, we've got our group facilitation course. Those build upon the basic foundations of Module 1. And the conflict course specializes in how do you deal with, conflict, how do you work it through? We have a whole resilient process of reconciling the conflict, and then how you deal with conflict and dynamics on the group level. That's our group facilitation and team dynamics course, and that's great for leaders and mediators and people designing team building days, or if you're designing workshops. There's a lot covered there. And then our next webinar is on February 26th, and it is the art of designing powerful questions. How do you direct these processes through your questions? Because questions are another form of programming the client. You're programming where to send their awareness and how to pay attention to their experience. And when you can map out the different kinds of questions, their function, and you know where you want to go, so you combine function with intent, along with being very present with what's happening in the moment, your questions become, they nail the moment. They become really on point. And so we're spending a whole webinar discussing what that takes, how to map it out, and we'll give you lots of examples of great questions to ask. So feel free to sign up for the next webinar. Feel free to sign up for courses or contact me with more questions, or go visit our website or follow us on Twitter, Facebook at EE Dynamics. And our website is essence-dynamics.com. What are you all walking away with today? What are your final comments, observations? What did you enjoy?
First of all, thanks a lot. It was really good. I mean, very much aligned what I know with my practice and with my trainings, but at the same time, it was a bit of fresh view from your side. So thanks a lot for this sharing. It was really fruitful. Actually, during this week, I have followed 3 or 4 coaching webinars, masterclasses. And even for today, I was like really hesitating because I didn't like the others. And I feel like it's late evening, etc. But I'm really happy I stayed.
Oh, great.
It was really useful. And I can say that This was the most fruitful of the whole week I have had followed.
Excellent. Just from my own curiosity then, what felt, let's say, most inspiring or most fruitful for you, especially when you say you were watching some other things and this gave you at least some payoff here. So what?
Okay. As I said, my training is in systemic coaching.
Yeah.
And myself, I have the background in psychology, which is a lot focused on this resilient state.
Great.
About the trust, etc. And also I have gone through my therapy, which is with the systemic constellations.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have showed here, there were like pieces of the systemic pattern and these parts. There were things that reminded me my NLP trainings about anchoring and everything. So, and what I liked is to see how you're using the systemic and pattern approach to have the more quick results, if I may say like that. I understood your approach is more focused on the quick results rather than...
Yeah, and it's not like quick as in let's skip over stuff. It's more like let's get the distractions out of the way so what's most important comes up front. And so there's very specific ways on how to do that, and it's actually pretty easy, but it requires your own shift of mindset, and you got to know what you're looking for. And we educate you on all that stuff, because really it's all right there in front of us, but it just sometimes takes time to see it. Mm-hmm. How do we bring it to the surface naturally and efficiently and cleanly, right?
That's a good question. How we are not really mixing our own patterns and our own reflections into the clients, and it's one of the key topics I'm usually focusing with my mentoring.
And that is a major part of the EED training, is that self-awareness and self-discipline, along with learning the techniques. Because
it's the foundation.
It's the foundation, because
your approach is the foundation.
You have your own system, the client has their system, the group has its system, and you're all part of the system on different levels. And so if you're not coming in with a clean system in yourself, that doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It just means you have a cleaner
self-awareness.
A self-awareness. And then you can have a cleaner facilitation with their system. And then on top of that, you can actually use your system to provoke their system in a very clean way and bring things to the surface.
Totally. I'm in that process, and then it's
awesome.
Totally something that speaks to me, to my values, to my practice, to my experience.
Yeah, well, great. So we'd love to have you come join a course because you're right. You're right there. It's perfect.
Yeah, I'll need to check the availabilities, and because I'm doing also some other courses now, I need to check the availabilities and also my schedule. But really, thank you.
Thank you.
I can tell you that I have followed few on the, I found them through the WebEx.
WebEx, yeah.
And also WebEx, and also through which channels? Through different channels.
Mm-hmm.
But yours is really practical. I could see, and it maybe because I know the experience, I have the experience, that's why.
Awesome, yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, and feel free to also, tell friends and colleagues about what you discovered, and say, hey, check out these webinars, check out these courses.
I will.
We love to have people participate.
Yeah, thank
you. We do these every month. Right now, we're doing them every 2 weeks, and then as of April, we'll move it to monthly. Yeah.
Okay, I'll check my availabilities and also the other webinars and courses from you. Thank you.
Excellent, great.
I need to leave because I have another.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great. Thank you so much, Astrid.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll see each other yet.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. And Paul, Amiel, anything left with here?
Yeah.
Comments?
I'm taking with me the binding function of emotions and reprogramming in a resilient narrative. So, that was very fruitful. I like the slide a lot, very specific and accurate, like a step-by-step guide, almost a recipe. And I want to work more with binding. Definitely.
Yeah, good to experiment with. And there's nothing wrong with emotions. It's just We need to decide, what are we doing in this moment? Programming or deprogramming? And then that determines how we handle the emotions, whether we're doing a release or an anchoring, right? So, and both are exploratory, yeah. Great. Amiel, anything from you? It was great to have you guys here.
Yeah, I got a lot of notes. It was a really good call. And what made me most happy is after yesterday's call to hear that actually complacency comes from the resilient self, because I was like, oh my God, complacency is like I'm still stupid. And then I'm resilient at that place. So I just need to talk with my pathetic self a bit so we can get a solution together.
Yeah, that's an important point. When we can create a great fluid relationship between pathetic self and resilient self, then we are in motion from a resilient place, connected to source. Resilience alone, yeah, has the risk or danger of becoming complacent, because of course it can create, but it doesn't have to, right? So the pathetic self gives it a little kick in the ass to go, deal with this. And it will handle it resiliently. The point is the difference is that the resilient self is creating from a true free will. Pathetic self is trying to create from a compromised position, basically. So, right?
Yeah.
It's another way to put it.
I have these things I want to do, but my resilient self will be like, oh, well, you want them because of this and because of this, and you can also be happy with that. Yeah.
The other place to go is, you may reactivate your resilient place and then go back to vision, purpose, meaning from the resilience, build the desire. Again, that's the way to get the resilient self moving as well, right? I mean, I wake up every morning and I'm like bombarded with, oh God, I should just give up and da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I'll, switch over and say, well, okay, fine. If it all goes to hell, I'm okay. I can rebuild, but then I'll get in that danger of complacency. And so bring in the vision, the purpose, the meaning, the desire, and then just do one small little thing that proves that back, and it gets the wheel turning. And then within an hour or two, I'm like, yeah, this is actually okay. Yeah, I'm moving. Hey, I'm getting things done. Great. And it just amplifies. And I think, why was I thinking that way in the morning? But that was real, just as real, right? So it's more valuable to be aware of yourself so you realize you have options. Okay, and then you have the choice to turn yourself around. You also have the choice to stay and indulge. And when you're resilient, you're aware of all the consequences. You're also aware that you can handle all those consequences. I think that's the big difference. So with that, I'll close the webinar, or I'll stop the recording here. And guys, if you have more questions, feel free to hang out. And so for everyone listening, thank you so much for joining and listening to the recording. And we hope that you'll check out all the information, and we hope to see you in a course. And we hope to see you next time on our next webinar. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.